Welcome to Freethought Matters. I'm Laurie, Gaylor.
And I'm Dan Barker. We're co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters. What do you know about Opus Dei, the secretive right-wing Catholic cult that is influencing U.S. courts and policy? Our guest today will tell us all about it.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters, is the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers. We invite you to join us in our vital work to keep our secular government free from religious influence. Become a member at FFRF.org or ask for a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Freethought Today. Freedom depends on freethinkers. Watch prior episodes of Freethought Matters on FFRF's YouTube channel.
We have talked in past shows about white Protestant evangelical support for Christian nationalism, but we haven't talked much about Catholic Christian nationalists. Today's guest will shed some light on a Catholic organization that is influencing our Supreme Court, our government, and that government of many countries around the world.
Gareth Gore is a financial journalist based in London who has reported from more than 25 countries, and he's covered some of the biggest financial stories. He's been published by Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters, and International Financing Review. Gareth hosts the Syndicate podcast.
Gareth Gore's new book, published by Simon & Schuster, is called Opus, The Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking, and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside the Catholic Church. Publishers Weekly, in a starred review, calls the book a chilling debut expose. So we are very pleased to welcome to Freethought Matters, Gareth Gore. Hello.
Hello from London. Thank you both for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we do want to focus on how Opus Dei is influencing U.S. policy in a moment, but we would like to talk first about how you got involved in this, how you wrote this book as a financial reporter. How did you come to investigate a religious cult?
I fell into this story completely by accident when I set out reporting what I thought was initially a banking story. So I was sent to Spain in 2017 to report on a high street bank there called Banco Popular that had collapsed. And I'd covered, numerous bank collapses before here in Europe. And it seemed like the same old story. It seemed like, a bunch of executives had basically allowed things to get out of control, and the bank had slowly kind of crumbled away. But the more I dug into the story, the less sense it seemed to make. And before long, I began to find links to this secretive Catholic organization called Opus Dei. And it's a bit of a cliche, but I just followed the money. I kept on digging, kept on following the money. And the tentacles of this organization took me around the world and the story just became more and more crazy, basically.
So are you saying that Opus Dei, this secretive cult, controlled a bank, a big, huge bank?
So yes, so what happened was in the 1950s, just as Opus Dei was beginning to really expand seriously around the world to North and South America, to Africa, Asia, and across Europe, they decided that they needed a bank because, at that stage they already operated dozens and dozens of different kind of businesses around Spain. They had publishing houses, they ran bookshops and all kinds of things. But they came to the conclusion that by owning a bank, it would really give them access to serious money to really finance their expansion to all these different countries where they aspired to operate. And so a bunch of elite members of Opus Dei, so-called nunneries, these celibate members of Opus Dei, they infiltrated this national bank. and they took it over. And by the end of the 1950s, they were in control of this thing, and they used Banco Popular as a cash machine to finance their expansion to all six continents around the world.
Well, your book goes into great detail about all the shenanigans and secrecy and even some corruption that they were doing, and smuggling money across borders. I mean, it's quite a cloak and dagger story that you tell here. But
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, you know, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there were restrictions on taking currency out of Spain. You know, these were the Franco years. There were, you know, it was a serious crime to transport money out of Spain without permission. But Opus Dei would send many of its operatives out of the country wearing these secret money belts. At great personal risk, they would cross the border and smuggle money out of Spain. I mean, there was one instance where one of the more senior members of Opus Dei was arrested by the police in Venezuela. In the early 60s, they found him with a briefcase of, I think it was $250,000, which was an enormous, I mean, it's an enormous amount these days, and back in the early 60s was an even greater amount. So yes, it kind of just gives you a bit of an idea as to how much money they were smuggling across the border.
so Opus Dei, I kind of read about it a little bit, but before Dan Brown's book came out, you know, The Da Vinci Code, which was a big movie, Opus Dei really wasn't on most people's radar. What is Opus Dei, and when did it start, and who started it?
Opus Dei was begun by a Spanish priest by the name of José María Escrivá, who, whilst on retreat in October 1928, he told everyone that whilst he was there, he received this vision from God. He said it came directly from God. And the vision was for a new kind of organization that would help ordinary Catholics to live out their faith more seriously. So it was a way for really devout Catholics to kind of go that bit deeper into their faith without the need to become priests or nuns. So that's how it started, but very quickly it evolved into something altogether more militant and kind of and darker as well. So, you know, this was Spain in the late 1920s, the early 1930s. It's a country that's deeply divided. The monarchy's just been overthrown. The workers are rising up, demanding new rights. They're turning their backs on the church. This is a country on the cusp of civil war. And Escrivá, this priest, sees what's happening around him, and he's horrified. He is horrified that the workers are beginning to question this hold that the Catholic Church has had over society. And he decides to fight back. And so he transforms this kind of rather benign philosophy of serving God into something altogether more militant. He decides to transform Opus Dei into a kind of secret society that aims to infiltrate every element of Spanish civic society, you know, government, business, education, and he wants members to use their positions in these kind of pivotal parts of society to wind back the clock and to kind of push against this progressive agenda, to be a reactionary force for God.
So he was a friend to Franco, I take it, and what was his opinion of Hitler?
So he was very much a friend of Franco. I mean, he hosted personal retreats for Franco and his wife at their palace on the outskirts of Madrid. And the Franco regime gave Opus Dei huge amounts of financial and operational support. Escrivá also had some very interesting takes on the Second World War and Hitler. He poured scorn on this idea that Hitler had killed millions of Jews. He was like, that's not possible. He was a conspiracy theorist at heart. You know, in the early 30s, he was obsessed with this idea that it was the communists and the Masons and the Jews that were orchestrating this kind of progressive agenda in Spain. And he found it very difficult to accept the facts of the Holocaust. He said he very much doubted that Hitler killed 4 or 5 million people.
Wow.
Your book calls Opus Dei a cult, but today there's a statue to Escrivá in the wall of the Vatican. Isn't Opus Dei a legitimate part of the Catholic Church?
Absolutely. I mean, to this day, Opus Dei remains a legitimate part of the Catholic Church. It was, not only that, I mean, Opus Dei has privileges that no other part of the church has. John Paul II was an enormous fan of Opus Dei. He saw them as a band of kind of fellow conservatives who could, I guess, subvert and undercut any kind of liberal streaks in the church. And so in the early 80s, John Paul II gave Opus Dei unprecedented power and unprecedented abilities to operate anywhere that it wanted to in the world, without having to report to the normal hierarchy of the church. So they could set up, new operations in Japan or Argentina or Nigeria, and they wouldn't have to report to the local archbishop. They wouldn't have to answer any questions at all to the local church hierarchy. And what that's done is allowed this organization to operate across the globe without any accountability whatsoever. And so, effectively this cult, this abusive cult, I would say, has been allowed to operate, in the name of the church. But I think many Catholics would be horrified to find out what this group is really up to.
So what is this group really up to in the United States, for example? What influence has Opus Dei had over the Supreme Court?
So everywhere it operates, right since its very early days, Escrivá made it clear that the main aim of its members was to infiltrate the corridors of power. So first of all, it would recruit people in positions of power and people that aspired to positions of power. So, the top students at Ivy League universities. Opus Dei to this day has a sizable presence on almost every Ivy League campus. So it's recruiting from the elite, today's elite, and it's trying to recruit tomorrow's elite as well. What Opus Dei tries to do is get its members into positions of power, and then encourages them to use their positions of power to basically push forward the Opus Dei reactionary agenda, to push back on any kind of progressive forces in society. And so, just to give you an example, Opus Dei has about 3,000 members in the United States. You would expect it being a Catholic organization for those members to be concentrated in Catholic cities like Boston or Chicago or New York, but that's not the case. The largest Opus Dei community in the United States is in Washington, D.C., and that tells you all you need to know about where this organization has focused its recruitment efforts and where it's focused its resources over the years. And that's because it wants to infiltrate the corridors of power. It wants to influence the direction that American society will take.
And you're saying through Leo Leonard of the Federalist Society, who is Catholic.
So yes. So Leonard Leo,
I always say his name wrong. Sorry.
It's an easy mistake to make. About 10, 15 years ago, Leo was already sending his kids to Opus Dei schools. Opus Dei operates 2 schools in the Washington, D.C. area, the Heights for boys and a school called Oak Crest for girls. So he was already sending his kids there. So he was already kind of within of the Opus Dei orbit. But he began to become much closer. He was invited onto the board of directors at the main Opus Dei Center in central Washington, D.C., on K Street, right in the heart of the lobbying industry. And he's been there ever since. Leo, who is credited with having orchestrated this conservative takeover of the Supreme Court, has been a huge supporter of Opus Dei over the years. He's given them a large amount of financial and operational support. He supports all kinds of Opus Dei initiatives across the US. He's behind a big initiative right now to expand the Opus Dei school network across the US. There are plans, right now Opus Dei operates about 10 schools around the US. And there are plans to expand this network to another 20 states across the U.S.
Was Leonard Leo behind Supreme Court nominations?
Yes, absolutely. So I think 5 of the current sitting justices owe their positions, very much to Leonard Leo. I mean, he helped to mount campaigns to ensure, well, first of all, he put their names forward to the various presidents, and then he was behind efforts to ensure that the nominations were pushed through Congress as well.
We are talking with Gareth Gore about his book, Opus, The Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking, and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside the Catholic Church. And when we come back, we want to ask you about Opus Dei's dark money and human trafficking.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist.
When I first recorded that commercial back in 2014, being openly atheist in America was still fairly uncommon. Today, the fastest growing religious group in the country is the non-religious, especially among the young. That progress is heartening, but the religious pushback is fierce and the forces of Christian nationalism are well organized. Our progress won't continue unless we work together so that reason and our secular constitution will prevail. That's why I'm asking you to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate, just like our founders intended. Please join the Freedom from Religion Foundation today. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
My name's Jarvis, and I'm an out-of-the-closet atheist. There are many reasons why I'm an atheist, but I'll start with the crudest explanation. I'm sure many of you have seen Clash of the Titans or The Immortals or 300, these blockbuster films about ancient Greek or Roman religion, which we now call mythology. But back then it wasn't mythology. It was very real for them. They genuinely believed that you had to put a coin in a person's mouth before they were buried so that they could pay for the literal ferry to the afterlife. Just as many people today believe that they should eat crackers and wine on a Sunday, or that God wants women to hide their bodies under black burqas. Every religion that has ever existed, and there are many, have all believed that they were right, that their rituals and rules and beliefs were 100% correct, and they all thought they nailed it. But where are they today? If they're not completely forgotten, they're on the silver screen, amusing us with their sword fights, animal sacrifices, and oracles. The religions of today are the entertainment of tomorrow. Everyone, I hope, is an atheist about Zeus and Apollo, Juno and Poseidon. I just added Jesus and Muhammad to that list.
Welcome back to Freethought Matters. We're continuing our conversation with the journalist Gareth Gore about his new book, Opus, The Cult of Dark Money, Human Trafficking, and Right-Wing Conspiracy Inside the Catholic Church. So Gareth, the subtitle of your book mentions human trafficking. What is that all about?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. So Opus Dei tries to maintain this very kind of respectable facade. I mean, it's trying to recruit the great and the good of society. And so, of course, it has to present its best side to the public. But there's this hidden underbelly to the movement. There's abuse and manipulation are absolutely rife within the ranks of Opus Dei. There's also a particularly kind of dark side to the organization, which is it operates all of these residences around the world where its celibate members live, and these celibate members are the ones that are going out and interacting with the great and the good of society that's seeking to recruit.
Are these celibate members all priests, or they aren't necessarily clergy?
No, they're men and women. Some of them are chosen to join the priesthood, but most of them start out as lay members, but who take up not quite vows, but they make, they dedicate themselves to a life of celibacy, poverty, and critically obedience to the movement as well. Yeah. So these people, they live in single-sex residences, and Opus Dei decided very early on that it needed effectively domestic servants for these residences. And so it decided to create this underclass of membership called, initially they were called the Numeri servants, and now they're called the Numeri assistants. And initially they recruited locally, so they would recruit young girls in Spain or the UK or in the US. But that's become increasingly difficult because, young girls and young women these days, quite rightly, have higher aspirations than domestic service. So it's begun to set up these, what they call hospitality schools in more underprivileged parts of the world, places like Argentina, Nigeria, the Philippines, where it's easier to recruit, recruit people into this kind of work. And so they go around, local villages, knocking door to door, basically offering girls a better life. They say, look, we can train you in the ways of hospitality. We'll train you how to cook, and we'll give you all these qualifications, and you can get a great job in the hospitality industry. But what it does, once these girls are taken away from their families, and these girls are like age 12, 13 years old, once they're living away from their families, they are indoctrinated, pushed, coerced into joining Opus Dei, and they become these Numeri assistants. Now, quite recently, there's been a serious case that's come up in Argentina. So federal prosecutors have spent the last 2-3 years investigating this in Argentina, and they've concluded that there quite clearly have been crimes committed of human trafficking and serious labor violations. And federal prosecutors in Argentina have formally accused Opus Dei of these crimes in the country, and we're set to see a trial. 4 Opus Dei priests are going to be going on trial. The deputy head of Opus Dei globally is implicated in this case as well. I mean, these are really serious allegations. But I know for a fact that what's happened in Argentina is just the tip of the iceberg. This kind of recruitment and this kind of trafficking of young girls and women has been happening around the world for decades.
So aren't they saying that these are basically, in most cases, unpaid slave workers?
Yes, for many years, these women they didn't have any pay at all. And in fact, there's a very good documentary that's about to be released on February 7th on HBO Max, a documentary that's called How I Left Opus Dei, where many of these women, not just in Argentina, but from other countries too, places like Ireland, Spain, Guatemala, Mexico, where they share their stories of how they were coerced into joining the movement, how they were, they worked for decades, some of them, for absolutely no pay. And when they left, they didn't have a dime. And these women, quite rightly now, are trying to get compensation from Opus Dei, but Opus Dei just wants to wash its hands of them.
So, Gareth, your book mentions that the initiation ritual was called an enslavement. Do the members consider themselves slaves?
Yes, it was absolutely called the enslavement, and that tells you a lot about how the founder saw the membership, particularly these kind of celibate members, the so-called Numeri members. They changed the name of that ceremony. It's now called the Fidelity. There's a lot of kind of PR, but effectively it's the same thing. And these Numeri members, these celibate members, are absolutely expected to be completely obedient to the movement. So whilst the kind of terms that the organization uses, whilst it's no longer called the slavery, they are still in effect expected to be slaves. And the way that the organization treats many of these people, there's a huge amount of spiritual, emotional, even physical abuse and manipulation. And so they are effectively treated like slaves in many ways.
So in our remaining 3 minutes, can we ask about the dark money that's in your subtitle?
Yes, so Opus Dei tries to hide what it's doing around the world. It operates there are a whole bunch of kind of foundations and non-profits that are operated by Opus Dei, kind of through these arm's length Numeri relationships. And Opus Dei tries to distance itself, but I've pieced together the pieces in my book. In the US alone, Opus Dei has or is linked to about 100 different non-profits, and between them they have assets of about $1 billion. And that's just the US, and the US isn't a particularly big country for Opus Dei. Opus Dei has a much bigger following in places like Spain, Mexico, Argentina, Italy. And so if Opus Dei has about $1 billion of assets in the US, you can only imagine the kind of wealth that it has in other parts of the world where its membership is greater.
So in a minute that we have left, it seems like from what you write, the current Pope is not so happy with Opus Dei. Is Francis trying to clip their wings a bit now?
So, I mean, there have been a couple of very serious complaints of abuse filed at the Vatican. One involves these women in Argentina, but there's been another complaint filed by numerals from more than a dozen other countries that allege extremely serious abuse. So the Pope is very aware of this this kind of blight on the face of the Catholic Church, and he has begun the process of reining in Opus Dei. He's issued 2 motu proprios. These are kind of papal decrees to clip the wings of Opus Dei. He's given them a chance to reform themselves, but so far Opus Dei has proven unwilling or unable to reform. And I think more serious action is likely to be taken against the organization. It may even be closed down.
You suggest that they might be waiting for Francis to die. Is that true?
Well, I think that's possibly the game that Opus Dei is playing. They are playing for time. The Pope is, in his 80s. He's not in the best of health. I think possibly one of the tactics being played by Opus Dei here is just to play for time and hope that he goes away, hope that he dies, and that hope that the next Pope might be more amenable to this conservative group.
Well, we are out of time, Gareth. Thank you so much for enlightening us about Opus Dei and joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, you have warned us that we have something to worry about here with Opus Dei. And we want to thank you for watching Freethought Matters.
Because free thought matters.